Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. This week, BB hangs Trump out to dry. Trump hangs his staff and the press out to dry. Europe's rivers and the U.S. West are dry as a bone, and poor Indiana is soaking wet. All that, plus coverage of Tuesday's primaries and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. But today, I am not asking for a paid subscription for us. I am asking you to donate to a local organization providing disaster relief, recovery, and direct support to Indiana communities affected by this week's floods. I will link to the Central Indiana Community Foundation in the show notes. They have a resource page where you can find several worthy charities who could use your help. So please direct your resources, financial and otherwise, toward helping your neighbors. You can still help us out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guests. First, a Who's Left rookie, but an old pro in progressive spaces. She's a cytopathologist and organizer with Indiana Progressive Democrats. It's Dr. Megan Alderman. Doc, good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me, I don't know, what does a cytopathologist do?
So I'm a surgical pathologist and a cytopathologist, but cytopathology is a little bit less known. So, usually you go to the hospital and you get like a tissue biopsy, like a breast biopsy or some other kind of biopsy. That's tissue. So cyto just means cells. So it's when they're using a really fine needle, like in the thyroid, or they do it for lung cancer screenings, they stick a very thin needle in and draw up cells, squirt it on a slide. And then I tell them if it's adequate, if it's cancer or not. And so it's a less invasive procedure, and they're able to do a lot of molecular studies and stuff with it. So it's kind of, it's fun. I like it.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work out there on all fronts, it certainly seems. So thank you for taking part of your Sunday here to be with us. We deeply appreciate it.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for the invite, Scott.
So let's welcome our other guest to the show. And, we've had him on the podcast. We've hosted him for several town halls, but it's his first time on the Sunday show. The newest inductee in the Cliff Marsiglio Memorial Who's Left Triple Crown Hall of Fame. He's the Democratic nominee for Congress in Indiana's 9th District. It's Brad Meyer. Brad, welcome.
Morning. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Megan.
Yeah, you too, Brad.
Brad, how are you today? Good to see you again. We've enjoyed hosting you on all of the other formats. Welcome to the fire hose on this fine Sunday morning.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
So, let's begin. And since the end of February, we've sort of been starting most every week in the Middle East, and we will do so again today. Brad, we just recently sat down with Dan Siegel, a retired professor of history and anthropology and an activist with Jewish Voice for Peace Indiana, to talk about Israel, the country's fraught relationship with its neighbors and the United States, and how American voters' evolving attitudes on the issue have affected and will affect our elections. And as I wrapped up that episode on Tuesday and let folks know you would also be a guest on today's show, I said, I bet this topic would come up again, and wouldn't you know it? So early this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a US-backed 15-point peace plan for Gaza in a rare public break with Donald Trump. Bibi said the IDF will not carry out any withdrawals until Hamas is fully disarmed down to the last weapon. Netanyahu is facing elections in October and looking to shore up support from his hard right flank. Even the head of Trump's so-called Board of Peace, itself not exactly a defender of Palestinian rights, pushed back. And on the other side of what should be a Palestinian state in the West Bank, Israeli settlers have besieged the village of Qusra this week, trapping residents in their homes, cutting water and electricity, and preventing the delivery of food aid. Palestinian officials have reported nearly 1,500 attacks this year alone, including instances where settlers staged takeovers of Palestinian homes. Israel has built over 150 settlements in the West Bank, all of which are illegal under international law, now populated by over 500,000 Jewish settlers. 3 million Palestinians in the territory live under military occupation, while the IDF and police largely look the other way or even assist settlers in these brazen acts. Even U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, himself a hardline Christian Zionist, called the settlers terrorists this week. So, Brad, even Netanyahu's political opponents, while offering criticism of his government's handling of the violence, support expanded settlements and reject Palestinian statehood. I don't see a partner for real peace anywhere on the Israeli political spectrum. Just easing you right in.
So, no, I don't believe that there is a partner for peace in Israel. Israel is in their next cycle of violence and repression and we're just repeating a cycle that we've seen since the founding of Israel. There needs to be a lasting peace. We need to stop reflexively supporting Israel. That doesn't mean we don't support Israel's right to exist, but it means that just because the Netanyahu government wants to do something or takes a position doesn't mean it's in anybody's best interest, and we shouldn't be funding policies that don't align with our values.
Yeah, very good. And Doc, I mean, this matters to American voters. Not just in federal elections. We're seeing people talk about it in Indiana and statewide elections, even though it may not be pertinent in all of these. It definitely seems like a moral litmus test for folks.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think younger voters, especially and progressives, are more and more seeing this become a central issue, that we do not want to fund billions of dollars to support this, genocide, as well as terrorism. When Mike Huckabee calls it terrorism in the West Bank, we know kind of where we are on the spectrum. And I think pulling back to just for a second, we're going to talk about a lot of different issues, which were basically a big FU to Trump this week. And I think this Netanyahu disagreeing with Trump so blatantly on this plan just kind of shows you where we are, that our leader has lost complete respect from, I think, everyone. And even Bibi is basically saying, we don't have to listen to what you say. We don't have to do what you're asking. And I think we also have to keep in mind that Netanyahu has elections coming up in October. And so he just wants to keep everything pandering to his base. He said it multiple times. He's never going to accept Palestinian statehood. And so, I mean, we're just running into a brick wall there, and we're continuing to fund. I think Alex Rollo brought up earlier on another one about how we're funding their healthcare. We're funding their healthcare system. We can't fund our own. So anyway, those are just some thoughts what you guys were speaking.
Well, no, it definitely seems like we've got things upside down for sure, where we're taking care of these other governments and subsidizing their war efforts, and we can't take care of our own people at home. We're going to talk about that a lot more today. Our government's being hollowed out. We can't take care of ourselves as we're suffering natural disasters and everything else. Meanwhile, we're propping up a violent regime who ignores international law willfully on the other side of the world. Brad, final words on this before we move on.
I think that's well put. We really need to be using our diplomatic strength to foster a lasting and just peace. And right now, that's really hard to see given the Netanyahu government and the continued existence of Hamas.
So, and it turns out that faulty or perhaps willfully misleading Israeli intelligence was responsible for one of the stories that dominated U.S. news this week. We talked about it last month when President Trump abandoned his newly operational Qatari-gifted Air Force One to depart a NATO summit in Turkey aboard the old Air Force One jet. Now, the story the administration gave was that Trump was sending the new plane ahead to the UK to be admired by U.S. troops while he flew on the older Boeing 747, for old time's sake. Well, we all knew that was a lie, and the New York Times reported at the time a credible threat on the president from Iran forced the change, as the Qatari jet is not fitted with all of the security measures of the older plane. Well, it turns out Trump wasn't on Air Force One at all. In an elaborate ruse, the president was surreptitiously smuggled away on an airport catering truck to a smaller Air Force C-32A, which he then flew to the UK along with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, leaving members of the press, White House staff, and cabinet members Scott Bessent and Marco Rubio to fly the decoy plane under threat of missile attack. Now, it turns out the CIA did not view the threat relayed by Israeli intelligence with a high degree of confidence, but Megan, that doesn't mean no confidence. They could have been sitting ducks while Trump absconded in secret.
Yeah, you have to think if you're Marco Rubio right now, you're kind of know where you are on the grand scheme of things. There's so much to unpack with this story. I think first and foremost, it's just another example of how Trump doesn't really give a shit about people, whether it's his staff or journalists. The fact that there was a threat at all, even if it was not credible, that he still had them fly up in the air to be the decoy. The decoy. That's like, it's just so telling for how he sees people and how he just sees them as pawns in his whole game of power. And also just talking about Air Force One, like why is it even the fact that he was saying, oh, I needed to use my old plane because the defensive, capabilities in my new plane that's fancy and golden from Qatar. I mean, it's just so messed up. Like, why is it even flying? Like, why is it even up in the air? Why are we paying for two giant? I mean, this is all our tax money that's going towards these. I mean, it's just insane. Also, I think it bears repeating that it was not a incredibly credible threat, at least it was vetted by the CIA, and it was actually the Israeli government who gave the threat to the CIA. And it just has to make you wonder if that was all just a political play to keep Trump scared and doing what Netanyahu wants him to do. So there's just a lot to unpack with that story. It was like a bad James Bond episode, like it with getting smuggled out of food trucks that are just crazy. And also, sorry, lastly, I will say this: there was no indication that this was ever going to be shared with the American public, that this whole thing went down. It was only because I think it was it the Washington Post that actually did the deep dive on this. So it's just,
I think the Times had it originally and the Post elaborated on it this week.
Yeah. So it was just like, the whole thing is just like, we don't have a plan. He's scared of everything. And so he'll act accordingly to save himself and Pete Hegseth apparently, but not Marco Rubio. So, I mean, it was just, anyway, lots to unpack there.
Well, listen, the good news is if something were to have happened to that Air Force One with Rubio on board, his oversized Florsheim shoes could have been used as a flotation device for everybody involved. But Brad, to Megan's point about the Israeli intelligence here, I mean, was there a credible threat? Are they just making this up to keep Trump afraid, to keep him involved, to keep him engaged in Iran, in the Middle East, and avoid, tucking his tail and running, which we probably should do?
So Israel has one of the most effective intelligence gathering systems in the world, and especially in the Middle East. And they're very effective at use of propaganda and information and disinformation, and they use it to their advantage. So I think that Megan has a really good point. Number one, if the Israeli intelligence services say that there's a credible threat, they're probably going to be the first ones to hear a credible threat. But we have to go through a vetting process to make sure that it's a real threat and it's not disinformation to try to throw us off balance or make us move in another direction. I guess my thought is, if you take one step back, that whole Qatari plane thing is bullbarsh. There is no reason that we should ever have accepted a plane from an outside source. It needed to be done starting from the airframe up, under the watchful eye of the United States. You know, we got a we got a seal from the USSR years ago, and they proudly displayed that seal. It was from children, right? The Russian children, and they proudly displayed it in our embassy, and it had a listening device in it, right? There is no way that we should have accepted anything. I mean, you keep in mind that Air Force One is designed that they could conduct a nuclear war if we were attacked from that plane. Do we really want something that was not done in the United States for our most sensitive command and control? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And again, I'm going to be, I think, agreeing a lot with Megan. I haven't heard anything yet that she said that I disagree with. Trump has no interest in compassion in other people. It's all about him, and he's more than just a narcissist.
Ain't that the truth? So these threats, credible or not, come months after the U.S. and Israel launched a joint war on Iran, which this week remains in a state of bluster with little actual shooting, but a stalemate over control of the strategically important Strait of Hormuz continues to hold the world economy hostage. At the end of last week, the Islamic Republic issued a series of demands in order to open the strait, including the U.S. lifting its naval blockade, withdrawal of American troops in the region, removing sanctions on Iran, releasing frozen Iranian assets, and paying war reparations. Trump basically responded with, "Oh yeah? Well, we're going to demand you pay reparations." Days later, the president claimed the Strait of Hormuz is under U.S. control, and Friday said, "Pretty soon, I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States." Maury's lie detector determined that was a lie. Iran continues to attack vessels trying to evade its own blockade, this week firing on 2 Emirati oil tankers. This marks the 17th and 18th times since the start of the war that ships belonging to the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company have been struck. The UAE is an important American ally in the region. And oil tankers being shot at is also an environmental disaster waiting to happen. An oil slick began washing up on the shores of Oman this week, the result of a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker running aground after being hit by an explosion in June. Iran continues to maintain de facto control of the waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply traveled before the war. Deputy Foreign Minister Qasem Garibabadi posting on X Saturday, quote, "The Strait of Hormuz cannot be seized by tweet, nor by aircraft carrier, nor by issuing an order, nor by an election speech. Iran neither fears threats nor cowers before displays of power. The Strait of Hormuz has been Iranian, is Iranian, and will remain Iranian. The strait will only be closed and opened under Iran's command, and as long as you do not accept the reality of defeat and seize your fanciful delusions, Iran will continue to enforce the blockade." Now, Brad, given that we started this illegal war, frankly, I don't think many of their demands are terribly unreasonable. Some of them, yeah, sure, but many of them, yeah, not really.
Well, so I think that the biggest betrayal, I mean, there's been lots of things to talk about, but I think the biggest betrayal that Trump has done so far is actually on the Iranian war. The fact is that any attack on Iran was going to have long-term implications, and it is wildly inappropriate that Congress was not consulted. And that the people, through their representatives, had an opportunity to weigh in. Now, if he had done that, maybe he would have gotten the approval that he did. Maybe he wouldn't. But the fact is that there's a lot of people that have fought in the Middle East and lost loved ones in the Middle East, and we should all have had a say in whether this is in our strategic best interest and necessary. And the reason he didn't do it is it's not necessary. It was a war of volition, not a war of necessity. I think at this point we've depleted a lot of our missiles, which is part of the deterrence from China invading Taiwan. And we've killed some of the leaders, but they're still in power, and there used to be protests in Iran, and all of those are gone. Now they've rallied around their own flag. They probably strengthened the Iranian government. I made a post recently that talked about, we should have tried diplomacy, and somebody said, that's just dumb. You cannot use diplomacy with Iran, but it's really in our best interest to try diplomatic and exhaust diplomatic solutions before we resort to military, and then the American people have to be consulted.
Oh yeah. No, Doc, it's like the Constitution wrote things this way, that Congress is the one that approves war and declares war. And we've seen since the end of World War II, increasingly the legislative branch has given more and more and more power to the executive to make these decisions unilaterally.
I mean, entirely. Our Congress is like missing in action. My dad calls them all bootlickers, and that's essentially what they are. Zooming back out specifically on this recent news, as Netanyahu gave the middle finger to Trump this week, Iran did the exact same thing. I mean, what they listed, they knew no one was going to accept. I mean, it was like they wanted reparations, they wanted relief sanctions, like all of those things. It was basically a slap in the face to any kind of diplomatic efforts that the United States is trying to make. And I think by every metric, this war is failing. I mean, we got into it with goals that were ever shifting depending on the day of why we were actually getting into the war. One day it was nuclear weapons. The other day it's because they were going to attack one of our allies, and by every metric, the strait is not open. Trump can say it till he's blue in the face, but if it was open, we wouldn't be here talking about this, and gas wouldn't be over $4 a gallon, so that's one thing. We are losing our missiles. That was a great point, Brad. Our weapons are being depleted, which is a really scary thing. It's not like you can just flip a switch and make more missiles overnight. We're years out from being able to resupply the missiles that we've been using. And Trump's response is that they're low-key negotiations. Like, this isn't a middle school project that's due on Monday and it's Sunday night. There's no low-keying it here. There's either, I mean, I really think, and this is a little bit philosophizing, but we have not made any gains at all. Things have gotten worse on every single way. And I think he's just going to have to pull out, declare a fictitious victory, and then the strait's going to be under control of Iran. And now we also have the Houthis in Yemen who are threatening to shut down another strait in the Red Sea. I mean, heading into the midterms, he's just underwater. So I just can't help but think that's what he's going to do, is just pull out and say, we won, everything's great now, even though, again, the American people aren't stupid. We see what's happening.
Yeah, and that's if they'll let him. They have a way of sucking us back into these things. So that is the state of the Middle East this week, and it's a mess. And the American people know it's a mess. A July poll shows just 29% of U.S. voters approve of how Trump is handling Iran. CNN data analyst Harry Enton said, quote, just 27% of all voters believe the U.S. will ultimately reach a good deal with Iran. And get this, just 41% of Republicans believe it. And you know who else is sick of this war? The soldiers and sailors forced to fight it. This week, both Stars and Stripes and the Navy Times reported that there have been multiple attempts by crew members aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln to jump overboard. The Lincoln has been deployed for over 8 months without a port of call in over 200 days, a modern-day record for consecutive days at sea. Sailors who have been able to communicate with family back home have reported lack of supplies, food shortages, water contamination, and mail system disruptions. Does this president care? He sure doesn't. Trump dismissed concerns from families of the service members on Friday. Asked if he was worried about troops' mental health and whether deployments have run too long, he said, "No, not nearly long enough." The USS George Washington is reportedly headed to the Middle East to replace the Lincoln, but it could still take several weeks before the sailors return to base in San Diego. Doc, this can't be good for anybody's mental health. I don't know. I can't even begin to put myself in those sailors' shoes right now.
Of all the stories this week, this is the one that is, to me, the absolute most gutting. Because again, it's just a complete metaphor. It's not a metaphor. It's a real life situation that shows you all of Trump's shortcomings. He doesn't give a shit about people, which we've talked about. I mean, especially our veterans and our active military men and women who we should be giving all of the support to. he just doesn't care. I mean, that was his response, was that, oh, they haven't been out nearly long enough, even though they've made a record for how long that they've been out at sea over. And it's because the Middle East it's because the war's going so terribly. Like, right? Like, raise back for a second. Like, the reason they've been in that situation to begin with is because we're in this war that we never should have been in the first place. And, I think everybody has a family member or themselves who have suffered or experienced a mental health disease, I mean, of some kind. I mean, I had postpartum depression. I know plenty of people who've had mental health, but to be trapped on a boat, knowing that your own administration doesn't care about how you're doing. I mean, there was a heartbreaking story of a wife who had received a message from her husband that he didn't want to wake up the next day. He was on board the USS Lincoln. I mean, truly horrific stories. But again, just kind of explains in a nutshell how little Trump cares about people, and especially our men and women in uniform. So, I mean, horrifying story. Who knows if they would have even sent a ship out to replace them, which they are doing now, if this hadn't all come to light. So, and I think Pete Hegseth also had a really disgusting comment about, how they're fine. It's been overblown. They can handle it. I mean, it's truly a disgusting story, but again, just highlights exactly how ruthless and unethical Trump and his administration are.
Yeah, and Brad, like I'm seeing that Iranian state media is reporting that there was like a mutiny aboard this ship, and the sailors are at each other, and like 7 people have been killed. Do I believe this? No, it's Iranian state media. But CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, denies that this happened. But can we trust them? They've already been caught lying repeatedly during this war. I don't know what to believe anymore when it comes to these things.
So I worked for the Navy for 9 years. I worked on systems that protected ships from missile attack. So the Navy is near and dear to my heart, and I know how stressful it can be. And I've got friends and family that have been deployed, and we need to be aware that there is a cost to war. There is a cost to militarism. And this is why, and I'm going to go back to my earlier point, this is why it is so important that the decision to attack Iran have gone through Congress, because it's going to cause hardship. It's going to cause difficulty. We need to make sure that we minimize those and make sure that they're properly supplied and that they're taken care of, and that morale is in place. But it's been enormously stressful. In 2024 and 5, and we've forgotten about this already. There were multiple attacks from the Houthis, missile attacks on American ships. It's a dangerous and stressful time. And the time of engagement, if a missile is fired, it is minutes and seconds to make decisions. So you are always under stress, because you're always on the edge of an imminent life and death crisis. And that, in a sustained way, even if you don't experience that, because you're heightened, it causes an enormous stress on people. And we need to be very thoughtful about how we deploy military forces and realize the enormous human impact to our own sailors and soldiers who are the sword and shield of this country.
The Republicans have always talked about how they support our troops, and it's always been crap. They're the first people to put these folks in the line of danger, and then say, well, you got to support our troops. Like, isn't the best way to support these folks to not put them in danger in the first place? I don't know. So let's move on. And excuse me, American troops are running on empty, and also due to this war, so is the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Created in 1975, the reserve this week fell by another 6.1 million barrels, dropping below 300 million for the first time since 1983. The president authorized the release of more than 170 million barrels in March at the beginning of the conflict, which has triggered the largest disruption of oil supplies in history. The minimum amount of oil needed to operate the strategic reserve is about 70 million barrels, and due to its aging infrastructure, about a quarter of the inventory is unavailable for drawdown, meaning about 100 million barrels are unavailable for use. And oil isn't the only critical supply running short. And this next one is even more important. We've mentioned this a couple times over the last few months, but this week, Lake Mead, the reservoir formed by Hoover Dam and a vital water source for much of the American Southwest, sank to its lowest level on record. Overconsumption, increasing temperatures, and persistent drought in the West are raising concerns about deepening water supply cuts that could affect millions of people. And it isn't only municipal and agriculture water supplies under threat. Lake Mead's hydropower availability to generate electricity is also under risk. If the lake drops another 5 feet, some turbines at the dam will have to shut down, dropping its generating capacity by 70%. According to the Bureau of Reclamation, Mead could near that threshold in the next few months and drop below it by spring. Brad, I don't know which is worse. It's got to be the water, right?
It is, in fact, the water. You can live for a while without electricity. You can't live very long at all without water. Water has always been a contentious issue in the West, and building massive cities and large agricultural facilities in a desert. It did work for a while, but in the long run, we're using more resources than we have. And I'm trying to avoid discussing global warming because there's I don't want to turn some people off, but it's a fact that the weather is changing, and we need more water out west. We need smarter application of that, and it's going to be painful.
Oh, and we'll talk about global warming. We're going to come up to that here in just a moment. But Megan, the U.S. also runs on oil. I mean, yes, the water is the most important thing, but before we get there, if we run out on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, gas is going to shoot way up. People are going to be incredibly anxious and in the streets. Like, I swear, it's the one thing that Americans care about is the price of gas. Like that.
Yeah,
that
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert in water or petroleum, but I think this news story captures this once again how little faith we have in there being like a cohesive plan. Like Biden drew down like some reserves like during his administration, but I think the difference here is just he clearly just never has a plan. Like the administration just doesn't have a plan. Like they're not good stewards of resources. And so when we see these headlines, I have no faith that there is going to be like a step in that's going to get us back on track, right? So like when we're drawing down all these gallons of oil, and it's just I know he doesn't have a plan to get us back on track, and I know that all he cares about is the quick slogan, the quick headline, that they're doing something, which they're not. I mean, if anything, they're going to make it worse. But so I don't know this, and every time I don't have a super detailed knowledge of what we're discussing, which is like in this case, to me, it just comes back to local organizing. Like whether or not you understand the intricacies of the Hoosier Dam water level or like petroleum reserves, like we have to get organized, find a campaign, find a Progressive Democrats of America chapter close to you, because all these things, especially on a local level, that's where we can affect change. So quick detour.
And yeah, Brad.
So I finally found something I can disagree with Megan on, so we'll get a little bit spicy on this. She said 3 times that they don't have a plan, and that is, I think, completely untrue. I know exactly what she's saying. I'm having a little bit of fun with it. They actually have a plan. It is Project 2025.
Oh, right, yeah.
It is a plan that is not in our best interest. It is a plan to strip us of power and autonomy and take away opportunity, and it's going to end with there's going to be no winners in this new system. There's just going to be people standing in line waiting for their turn to lose. There is a plan. It is not in the best interest of the American people.
They're going to crash the economy. The already wealthy are going to scoop up the pieces and get even wealthier than they already are. There's going to be a handful of people that own everything, and then the rest of us, are we ready to get in the streets yet? Maybe not yet, but soon. So let's move on. And here we got Lake Mead and Lake Powell and the rest of the Colorado River Basin drying up. Also out west, wildfires are burning in Utah, Washington State, and the Canadian province of British Columbia, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate. And Europe is on fire too, and I don't know if that's still or again. Massive wildfires raged across the continent just weeks ago, and more have broken out this week as the continent experiences its fifth severe heat wave of the year. The UK experienced its hottest day of the year, while temperatures in France reached 106 degrees Fahrenheit. The repeated stretches of extreme heat are causing major European rivers to run dry. Cruise providers are canceling sailings on the Rhine, Danube, and Main rivers as water levels have plunged. The Danube is at its lowest level on record, and the Loire, France's longest river, has partially dried up in places. The low river levels here also threaten power generation, as several nuclear plants have had to shut down reactors due to insufficient cooling water. One plant in Hungary, which produces almost 40% of the country's electricity, was briefly at risk of complete shutdown. And if it's not the heat, climate change is posing other more unusual threats to nuclear power generation in Europe. 3 reactors at France's Gravelines nuclear plant were shut down on Monday after water intakes were overwhelmed by a swarm of jellyfish, whose population has exploded in warming seas. And while Europe and the American West could use some rain, Indiana this week has had more than enough. On Tuesday, a strong derecho tore through northwest Indiana, knocking out power, dropping a couple tornadoes on an area that has already seen several this year. And as the system progressed across the state, dropped massive amounts of rain on the central and eastern parts of Indiana. And the rain continued all week. Some areas received more than 10 inches in just over 24 hours. The White River crested more than a foot above the previous record set in 1913. Anderson, Cambridge City, Hagerstown, Yorktown, Metamora, Muncie, Newcastle, Connorsville, and Brownsville all experienced catastrophic flooding. Hamilton County suburbs, Noblesville, Fishers, and Carmel also faced major cleanup. In Indianapolis, major flooding affected the Broad Ripple, Ravenswood, and Rocky Ripple neighborhoods. Roads have been washed out. At least 5 people are dead across the state. Dozens more have needed rescue by first responders. Governor Mike Braun has declared a state of emergency and announced that President Trump will approve the state's request for a federal emergency declaration, allowing Indiana to draw FEMA aid. Braun said the state's rainy day fund will be used to help recovery efforts and that the state's reserves would shore up its responses to future storms. Doc, nowhere on Earth is safe from the effects of climate change, be that Europe or the West or right next door.
You're going to need a bright spot on your show, Scott, where you have like one good news segment. Just like one.
The water here and the water there, it all evens out, right? That's how this works.
So I think, we're rapidly reaching the point with global warming where it's, Brad can't say it, but I can, but where it's no longer theoretical, right? Like I think when global warming, when the concept was like academic and seen as like a far left, fantasy that's trying to scare people. I think
fake news,
we're just
Chinese
fake news. It's all fake. And we're just reaching that. It's going to eventually be like gas prices, where it's like where we could. I mean, you were saying how the American people responds to gas prices, right? So when your house is flooded, like I was like close friends of my family who live in Ravenswood who had to evacuate. Their houses are completely flooded. When you're living through wildfires in California, where your houses are being destroyed, where the water is depleted in other places, when these very real things happen, and they are going to be happening with increasing frequency, there's just no longer going to be any way to deny what's happening. So I guess I don't really know where else to go with that, except that things are horrific. We should have been on this decades ago to affect any change that's happening now. We're so far down the path, it's going to require nothing short of a miracle to kind of get us back on track as far as global warming and the absolute horrific natural disasters. And of course, we have to bring equity into it too, because it's gonna affect people who have the most to lose first.
Well, if you look, it's been 20 plus years ago now at this point, but Hurricane Katrina, I think, is the first time I think a lot of people really, saw the concrete effects of climate change in real time. And that, to your point, affected lower income and minority populations first and most egregiously. And the city has still never recovered. Brad, you're going to win a seat to Congress here in a couple months. What are y'all going to do about it when you get there?
So first of all, I was being a little bit tongue-in-cheek saying that I wanted to avoid the use of climate change. It is real. It is human-caused. And I think I found my second point where we can have a little bit of back and forth with Megan. I have a lot more faith in people's ability to be in denial. And I think even when people are evacuating, they can deny that there is global warming and climate change, which is really unfortunate, and it's something we're going to struggle with for the long term. One of the things that I did, we got ready to put out a post on this, and I wanted to get some basic information for people where they could go to get more information. So I went to the government websites, and they had declared, Mike Braun had declared an emergency. So I went to the state site, and it wasn't on the state site listed. There wasn't a direct link. You go to the emergency management for the state of Indiana, and you should be able to click on it. And in big, bold, flashing letters, it should be saying, "We've declared an emergency. This is an active," and click here for more information for your county. Couldn't find it. And then I went in and went to each of the 18 counties' FEMA sites. And this is just a petty thing. Some of them did not say the state of Indiana. So when you type it in and you hit it, one of the first sites that came up for emergency management was not actually, I can't remember what county it was, but it was a county in a different state. Right. So you didn't even know at first whether it was happening. There weren't any big, bold, flashing letters saying there's an active emergency on the FEMA site. On the emergency management site. I went to the counties that there are shelters. Those shelters were not listed big and prominent. I went to the Red Cross. They listed several sites, but they did not list all of the sites, and there's at least one or two local community shelters that the Red Cross didn't have listed. And then on top of all of this, they're gutting at the federal level FEMA, right? Mm-hmm. And what they're really going to do is they're going to gut it and make it less effective, and then they're going to try to privatize it and tell us that people making profit off of our misery is in our best interest. This is part of the plan that I was alluding to earlier, that they want to privatize everything and so that people can make profit off of us instead of the government caring for us and taking the basic essential services that we need. This is all complete bullbarsh.
It's bullbarsh. That's your second bullbarsh today, Brad.
I apologize for the strong language.
But we're totally unprepared for this, Megan. We're the world as we've constructed it is built for a world that no longer exists, really. All of our infrastructure, to Brad's point, things like digital infrastructure, just like where to go, where to get your warnings, where to get resources, where to get services, not prepared for that. But like the roads aren't prepared for it. The bridges aren't prepared for it. The dams aren't prepared for it. None of this is, it's going to take massive amounts of investment to rebuild, to build bigger, to build better, to build in a sustainable way to mitigate climate change, and we're doing the opposite, it seems like.
Yeah, we are, and it's just the only hope that I have, at least for the United States, is that we win back the House. Hopefully, we win back the Senate, and then maybe we can start to try to undo some of this damage. But I mean, it's going to take decades, really, of a committed plan. To use reusable energies and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there's a lot to be depressed about. And honestly, I think about my kids. I have an 8 and 10-year-old, and I just, what kind of life, what kind of environment, what kind of infrastructure are we leaving, for them? And it's just, that's part of what motivates me, I guess, as a progressive. And I think that's part of what being a progressive is, truly, is just, we're no longer accepting the status quo of our government, and we're not accepting the status quo within our own party, even because what we've seen with a lot of establishment types and the GOP is just sometimes the trimming around the edges of things, but not like fundamentally rebuilding sound strategies that could set us up for generations to come. So I'm I'm trying to remain optimistic. Brad, you got to get in there and do some stuff, dude.
Well, so one of the reasons that I'm a progressive is built into the heart of it, the root of it is progress, right? We've got to start making things better and not just look better, but fundamentally be better.
Absolutely. And so Brad alluded to this, but, I said Governor Braun and also Senator Jim Banks have touted the president's emergency declaration and the FEMA assistance that should come with it. The problem, FEMA is a shell of what it was just a couple years ago. Politico reported last week that the agency has cut its staff so quickly and haphazardly in the second Trump administration that it is unprepared for this year's hurricane season, with staffing down more than 20%. And quoting the article, FEMA officials who respond to hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, floods, and other natural disasters every year told the GAO, that's the Government Accounting Office, that they were essentially wandering around in the dark because the Trump administration had not provided guidance on how to proceed with greatly reduced staff. End quote. And Chris Fugate, who headed FEMA during the Obama administration, said the GAO report was too narrowly focused on hurricanes, warning that a major disaster could happen at any time, so the issues at FEMA need to be corrected as quickly as possible. You don't say. And FEMA isn't the only government agency thrown into the wood chipper over the last 18 months. Mother Jones this week summarized a report from the GAO detailing deep and wide cuts across the federal government made by Elon Musk's DOGE program, the IRS, USAID, Social Security Administration, important science, medicine, and educational research initiatives, financial regulation, and product safety have all been affected. Federal grants to Indiana fell by more than $700 million last year, with rural broadband and electrification projects cut to zero. The Capitol Chronicle also reported the state netted $292 million less for the epidemiology and laboratory capacity program, which is meant to strengthen the nation's ability to detect, prevent, and respond to infectious diseases. Brad, it certainly seems like they're telling us we're on our own.
Yeah, and in fact, I can't remember exactly what month, but Trump actually said, we can't afford to do all these other things. We need to fund wars, right? So they're not, they're gutting things that help people, but they are increasing funding for ICE, and they want to increase military spending by I think $500 billion, like a 50% increase in military spending. But there's things at home that we need. I mean, we need FEMA. We need, you think about, we're experiencing a lot of flooding. There was a lot of flooding in the past and electrification issues in Tennessee years ago, and the Tennessee Valley Authority was instrumental in very large projects that helped prevent problems. And I guess for me, I want to start working on more prevention, whether it's medical or other systemic social issues, instead of just putting Band-Aids on these problems. And the way they've approached it, it's beginning to feel like when they say waste, fraud, and abuse, they mean everybody that's not them.
Yeah, and Doc, Brad mentioned the TVA, and yeah, the flooding mitigation was super important. The electrification was super important. But if you want to look at it completely cynical economic terms, it was a huge economic stimulus for the area. We could be pumping all this money into our infrastructure to do climate mitigation, to prepare for the new world that is being born, amidst climate change. And we're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not. I think it's part of the strategy of just burning things to the ground, which is certainly a strategy. I mean, it's not really a winning one, but it's, we saw this with DOGE, with all these cuts. I mean, because there's always been this, and the Republican Party, but definitely in MAGA, it's just, we get rid of the government. I mean, they're not completely anarchists because they still want to give tax cuts to their billionaire friends and all of that. But it's just tearing down more and more of those infrastructures that we've come to know and expect. And then even more so, it puts the states in such a bind, because if you're going to cut all of this federal funding, you're expecting the states to kind of step up to fill the gap. And when you're in a place like Indiana with, Governor Braun, who really has no interest in doing that, and touts how we've had billions of dollars in reserve, he's very proud of that. But meanwhile, we have the highest, I think we have the highest rate of people being kicked off Medicaid, like in the country. My nephew, just to bring it home, because you got to bring it home too. It's like my nephew, who's on the autism spectrum, he gets the Medicaid waiver to pay for his therapies, to pay for medical bills, for his developmental pediatrician. They were kicked off. And so my twin sister, who's amazing, had to spend hours and hours of time. She had to go visit the Medicaid office 3 times. They're actually doing an article on her and her family in Bloomberg. But I mean, this is happening to our people. This is happening to the people who need the most, who are the most, have the most to lose, and also have the most to gain when these systems work, right? And so, anyway, all that to say, it's horrific, and burning down our infrastructures in FEMA, and expecting the states to step up, especially when we're in states like Indiana, is just a losing strategy for the everyday American and Hoosier.
And to your point about the Medicaid cuts, I was just talking with Nick Marshall about this the other day, and we've seen just in the last several weeks, Indiana's denial rate has spiked like 6 times. They're just cutting people willy nilly, and Brad, they're pushing us to the point where we're going to wind up like, you can't rely on the government, you can't rely on doing things collectively. You're going to have to be beholden to your feudal lord to get protection. They're going backwards to the age of feudalism, it seems. Just extra steps.
So there's the plan, right? This is not in any way accidental. One of the things that I talked to a lady when I first started running, and I talked to several other people almost immediately after, that were struggling with the Medicaid cuts. And it's an intentionally complex and denial-based system. And she has a daughter with cerebral palsy, and now she's going to have to recertify every 6 months that her daughter has cerebral palsy, and they cut the staff to review that. So
exactly.
So they've dramatically increased the workload and dramatically reduced the capacity to do that work. So they're intentionally making government incompetent. And, I'm running for a job because I want to fix problems. I want to make things better. I want government to work more efficiently. And we've got people in government right now that are intentionally undermining it and then pointing at it saying, see, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with bad management. We need to get better management. We need to get management. And when I talk about management, I'm talking about leadership that cares about the people. And that's not the people we have in power now. And that's why I'm running against Aaron Houchin.
They're putting hurdles up in front of the people and making us jump over these walls and jump through these hoops. And it turns out, you jump over the wall and there's not solid ground on the other side of it. You just fall in a hole. It's disgusting what is happening to us. And most people don't want this. Across the political spectrum, people want a government that works well for them. So let's talk about examples of government continuing to not work well for people. So I mentioned that our state, one of the leaders in medical and infectious disease research, had seen programs defunded amidst compounding public health crises. The floodwaters alone from this week's natural disaster pose hidden hazards in the form of household waste, industrial contaminants, and sewage. The receding waters create breeding ground for mosquitoes. The desiccated carcasses of animals killed by the flood can attract rats and other disease-carrying vermin. And then there's the mold, which flourishes in dank environments. All of that on top of the cyclospora outbreak that has now sickened at least 20,000 people across 46 states. Nearly 1,900 cases have been reported here in Indiana, and next door in Michigan, 2 people have literally shit themselves to death from the parasite, the first fatalities reported from the outbreak. And Taylor Farms, the producer whose lettuce has been linked to the cyclospora, is now also recalling several prepared products, including salsa and guacamole, due to salmonella concerns. Who is supposed to watch over these things? The Department of Health and Human Services and the CDC, which have also been gutted under the leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Did somebody say desiccated carcass? What he's doing instead, pursuing an anti-vaccine crusade in the face of all medical and public health knowledge. This week, Kennedy stood with Donald Trump in the Oval Office as the president signed an executive order making recommendations about the childhood vaccine schedule. It says that measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine should be split into 3 separate shots, among other recommendations. Kennedy and Trump blame vaccines for an increase in diagnosed autism cases over the last 30 years, despite this link having been repeatedly debunked. An earlier CDC order reduced the recommended number of shots on the vaccine schedule, but was stayed by a federal judge in March. Megan, they seem to have a theme going on here. Government being dismantled, all the things we rely on across the board, FEMA aid, the IRS, everything, infrastructure building, and now the public health infrastructure also being dismantled under RFK. You're a doctor. What are you seeing? Is this affecting you in your work?
It's so I would say I'm medical director of the laboratory and in my hospital setting. So, I mean, I will be informed of increased rates of things, but as far as I don't see patients, so my hat's off to all of the clinicians who will actually directly see these patients and how they're affected. But higher level, this is again part of the whole burn it all down, right? But even more so, this administration has really made it their mission to just completely trash expertise and science. Completely. I mean, we go to school for a really long time, and I'm not saying that to be like elitist or whatever, but like we go to school for a very, very long time to learn the intricacies of immunology, virology, bacteria, like these. A lot of the headlines today felt like a review in my microbiology. I had like PTSD from all the microbiology hours that I had to spend, but there's such a level of arrogance and incompetence with somebody like RFK to try to dismantle our vaccine system, which is such a miracle. I mean, I just wish people would fully appreciate what a miracle vaccines are. And we have absolutely no evidence to suggest that there's any link with autism. I mean, if you go to any well-conducted study, we know that, but they know it gets headlines, right? So again, it's back to the headlines, grabbing slogans, and to the MMR vaccine in particular, trying to separate it out. I mean, we don't even have that available in the United States. Like, we can't even do that. If they said tomorrow, no, the MMR is not even available, you can only get it through these single dose. We don't have that. And so what would happen is people just wouldn't get it. And I think Japan actually did separate out the MMR vaccine, but you know what happened? All the rates of those viruses skyrocketed, right? So it's a cause and effect. Science is real, and people will die. Like, it's not an exaggeration to say kids will die or can have very serious consequences and morbidity for the rest of their lives from these decisions that are being made. And to have somebody like RFK Jr., he's just a clown. I just can't even take anything he says seriously. Whenever I see I can't even listen to him. I have to read things because I can't even watch him talk because my adrenaline gets going and I just can't, it's probably not good for me and my anxiety spiking. So yeah, and also to bring up the point about the FDA and the CDC, all of these organizations that's part of their task is to identify and track and do contact tracing to be able to early intervention in these cases and outbreaks. They've been gutted too. So it's again, the people who are at risk the most will be the ones who suffer first. And I hate to think that kids actually dying or having permanent, morbidity causing, losing liver organ failure, whatever it is. I hate that will be what maybe see people come to the light. But it's just, oh my God, is that what it's going to take? No words.
We're gonna resuscitate the iron lung industry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, make polio great again.
Exactly.
But I didn't even mention the flesh-eating bacteria. We got that going on.
You did it. The Vibrio. I mean, Vibrio is terrifying. Yeah.
Well, Brad, we talked about they're dismantling things and privatizing everything and taking us back to sort of a pre-small L liberal feudal state and taking away scientific knowledge. puts us back into the dark ages in that regard as well. Like, everything is very mysterious and, acts of God, right? Where we don't understand how
the
things
humors. You got to balance the humors.
Got to balance the humors, phrenology, you got to measure the brain size, right? But only a select few, the in-group, the rich, will have that specialized knowledge. Everybody else will be left in the dark, perhaps literally.
Yes, and there's a real distrust among a lot of people in the United States of experts and of knowledge, and I think that there's, and I'm not on their side, but I there is also I think a tendency, or has been a tendency, to say, yeah, we know about this, right? And people aren't able to connect it with their own intuition. If they see one thing, then that biases them to think one thing. And if their friends tell them, and if they read it, they believe it instead of knowing what the details are. And it's really corrosive. The problem is that we've made things so much better that we have forgotten what bad looks like, right? And a great example, and I can't remember what disease it was, there was a shot given to everybody that goes into the military, because they had a whole bunch of it during their boot camps in the past, and they didn't have any. And they went back and they looked at records and says, we haven't had this problem in 70 years. We haven't had a major outbreak of this. We don't need to give the shot anymore. So they stopped giving the shot. And guess what? It came back, right? So people forget, what it was like. And frankly, if you walk through an old cemetery and you see all of the small gravestones that just say infant, you begin to realize how far we've come. And a lot of that came from clean water and sewer systems that worked, and immunizations and better healthcare. All of these things are under attack. And we're getting to the point that it's just ludicrous. I mean, RFK said this week that there is a strong link between circumcision and autism, right? Which is just ridiculous. And then you look at it and you say, well, he had a point to make. And the point that he was making was, it's because they gave the babies Tylenol. Now, I don't remember the experience, but I know it hurt because I didn't walk for a year. Okay. So.
That's too good. That's too good.
All right. So that's all I have to say on that.
Oh my God, Brad. Well done. Well played, sir. Yeah, Doc.
Yeah.
So because I do come from the medical community and I hear what you're saying, it's a really good point of people being distrustful of experts. So, and you were saying that, it's been too good for too long, or is there a way that you have found in talking to voters and constituents that you're able to deliver that message without coming off as, the elitist expert? Or is there a way that you think we should be doing it? Because I'd love to hear that.
It's really a difficult thing to explain without being patronizing.
Right.
And I'll give a good example, a good counter example. When my son was newborn, I think at the time, the medical community in the United States said that you should put your children on their stomach or their back. I can't remember which one it was. And I asked the doctor, I said, there's been studies out of Europe that said that you should do it the other way, and that the high incidence of SIDS in the United States is partially because of how we put our children to sleep. And she got pissed. And she said, I'm going to refer you to another doctor because you just don't want to listen to me, right? I think that doctors struggle on a daily basis trying to explain what they've learned. and they just have to be open to that discussion. And many of them are, and I know that they work on it. But a lot of it comes back to basic education. Our history class, we have to memorize, when the War of 1812 started, and we have to memorize all the presidents, and we have to memorize all these facts. But what we really need to get across in our history and our civics and our education system is where we've been, where we're going, and what goes into making a good functional society. And instead of doing that, we're privatizing education. We're gutting millions, hundreds of millions of dollars out of even just the 9th district for public education, for privatization. Yep. So we're definitely headed in the wrong direction.
So, what is our government good for under this Trump administration? They can't collect taxes. They can't distribute foreign aid. They can't prepare for the effects of climate change, help our communities recover from natural disasters, or keep us from shitting ourselves to death. What are they good for? Spying on Americans. Now I'm reading directly from The Guardian. Quote, newly disclosed records reveal the U.S. government extensively spied on prominent left-wing organizations and on protesters as part of a vast operation into groups opposing the immigration crackdown in Minnesota earlier this year. Internal investigative reports show the Department of Homeland Security sent undercover agents to community meetings in the Twin Cities and New York City, infiltrated signal chats, and obtained financial records of mainstream unions and left-leaning nonprofit groups. Nearly 30 internal law enforcement reports were released on Thursday as part of a criminal case the Department of Justice has filed against 15 Minneapolis protesters. The defendants are accused of conspiracy to impede U.S. immigration officers during the Trump administration's surge in the region. The records show that in January, DHS launched an inquiry called Operation Puppet Master to identify a network of conspirators organizing against ICE. Documents show that the government alleged major groups were connected to the criminal conspiracy, including the National Labor Unions, AFL-CIO, and SEIU, the local Minneapolis Federation of Educators, and the Minnesota Education of Professional Employees, and several large left-leaning groups, including DSA and Surge, showing up for racial justice. And as a treat for this patently illegal spying operation, new Troys for Trump's Gestapo. The AP reported this week that ICE will spend $20 million on a no-bid contract to purchase thousands of electric shock gloves, a technology that had been adopted in recent years by some jails, police departments, and school resource officers. That's what they do with the people that are here, and in order to keep new immigrants out, the administration will bulldoze through pristine and holy natural wonders. A lawsuit was filed Friday in Texas seeking to stop the construction of border barriers through Big Bend National Park, an area held sacred by several indigenous tribes in the region. Brad, this spying thing, flagrant Fourth Amendment violations across the board.
Absolutely. And, Americans have that constitutional right to be left the heck alone, right? And to not live in a police state where they're under public and police scrutiny. And that is something that I think Democrats and Republicans can both agree on. It is a dangerous slide into more into the police state that we're already in. The people that are being surveilled are standing up for their moral precepts, and I think that in the future they're going to be viewed more kindly than they are today by some. I think history is going to judge them well by the things that they've done. You put a lot of things in there to unpack. We've got flock cameras that are watching us. We've got shock gloves, and this isn't who we are. This isn't where we should be going.
It maybe not. It's not where we should be. It's not where we should be going. But isn't it kind of who we've always been? I don't know, Doc. Sierra Martin in the chat over on Progressive Indiana Network, on Substack Live mentions COINTELPRO. she mentions the Patriot Act. We were, the people who they said were crazy were warning about this 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Oh my God, what is time?
Yeah, I mean, this is fascism, right? I mean, a lot of these examples that you brought up are totally consistent with a fascist state and government. The flat cameras you brought up, I was going to say that too. Diego Morales turning over all of our voter identification to the government. They're using these tactics that, on one hand, if used in the right way, could be defensive with our government and our infrastructure, but with the people that are at the helm, they're just going to use it to attack people. I mean, that subpoenaing people that they don't agree with has become like their other new thing. David Comey, like all these people that they disagree with, they just become under attack. And it's like, why would we ever let anyone monitor us? The flat cameras are supposed to be for like speeding, but obviously we know in the wrong hands, and they've been used to track women who have been trying to escape relationships and had police.
Didn't an IMPD officer just get suspended or fired for this?
Yes. He was trying to, I forget if it was his ex-wife or his partner or somebody who had like a restraining order, and he used it to follow her movements. I mean, my God. And the gloves thing just seems like some sci-fi fascist, I mean, it's so crazy. And we don't trust them. We don't trust ICE with guns, right? They've killed people, so they think they're going to give them these electric shock guns, and they think that they're going to read the manual and say, oh, you can't hold them for more than 15 seconds. Apparently the gloves have been used in Kentucky already, and a man died because they were able to see how long that the shocking had happened, and it was like for 95 seconds, and he died. He literally had arrhythmia and died. So it's just like, we're going to expect these people in ICE we already know they've had their training over time. They're reaching more and more for MAGA kind of elements to join these. And we think they're going to have the self-restraint to only use it against self-defense, not verbal antagonism, not like, there's this whole list of when you're not supposed to use the gloves, and you're only supposed to use them in very specific situations and not more than 15 seconds. But we really trust that that's how this is going to go down. I mean, it's just delusional.
Maybe we can count on the fact that ICE is receiving poor training on how to use these things, and they'll forget to take them off before they go to take a leak. So let's move on. ICE was very much one of the fault lines in the Minnesota primary elections this past Tuesday, where Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan defeated Congresswoman Angie Craig for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. Flanagan, who enjoyed support from popular progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, as well as retiring Senator Tina Smith, highlighted Craig's votes in support of ICE and for the anti-immigrant Laken-Riley Act. U.S. support for Israel and the influence of corporations and wealthy donors were also major factors in this race. Now, Flanagan will take on Michelle Tafoya for that seat in November. Tafoya, a former NFL sideline reporter for ESPN and other networks, won the Republican nomination on Tuesday. The next day, she was on Fox News, where she said Minnesotans have told her their state is quote, embarrassing. And she agreed. Not a good way to start the general election campaign. Elsewhere in the land of 10,000 lakes, another unapologetic progressive, Matt Little, won the Democratic primary in the 2nd Congressional District. That is a purple suburban district that Angie Craig had represented before seeking the Senate nomination. In the state's gubernatorial race, Democratic U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar will face Republican State House Speaker Lisa DeMuth, who defeated Trump ally and election conspiracy monger, the pillow guy, Mike Lindell, who, you guessed it, refused to concede, alleging voting irregularities. Megan, Peggy Flanagan, big win for progressives in Minnesota Tuesday night.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I want to take one happy angle here, and that, political pundits have been all over the place since the primary, saying like, Wisconsin is an example that progressives can't win. Minnesota is one where they can win. So it's like, as humans, we like to make really complex things, one-sided. But I think we do have some overarching themes from the primaries, which is that progressives can no longer be ignored. Like, we cannot be ignored. And in general, we are moving in that direction. Because even in Wisconsin, where Crawley won over Francesca Hong, he barely won. And the the establishment Democrats could barely get it together for that race. They had so many people kind of entering and exiting. And, that was a close race, especially for a progressive who had called into question Thanksgiving, canceling Thanksgiving, and things that people would consider maybe not super marketable, but that was a close race. And then in Minnesota, Flanagan winning over Craig, that was not close. She definitely she definitely won. And I think in Connecticut and some of the other primaries, I think we can generally say our candidates are moving more progressive. They're moving younger, which I think is also something that a lot of people kind of want to see. Younger people running, not like the career politicians who've been in office for like 3 decades or something. The Mitch McConnells who are gonna be around until they're actually dead. so we'll see. Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe Mitch is still having proof of life.
Who knows?
I think the phrase you were looking for is completely dead.
Completely dead.
Instead of just mostly dead.
Instead of mostly dead, yeah. So anyway, I think the primaries, I don't know, I had an optimistic light from them, and that, from Michigan, which I know was not this week, but it's just, I think things are moving in the progressive corner. And so it's going to just be about how they can appeal to a more broad electorate, because these are primaries, obviously. So it's going to really matter a lot in the midterms to see if these candidates are actually able to pull through. So those were my takeaways from the primary.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about Wisconsin and some of the other states here momentarily. But, back to Minnesota, Brad, to Megan's point, Flanagan won this race going away. We saw Little in the 2nd district. Again, that's a suburban district, going away, won by a lot. And it'll be interesting to see, the criticism of the progressive movement is, they can only win in, safe blue places like New York or California. Here we've got Abdul Al-Sayed in Michigan a couple weeks ago, winning that primary. We've got Flanagan here in Minnesota. We've got, the industrial heartland, as it were. Are you worried about these folks, quote unquote, electability?
No, I'm focused on my electability. They've got their race to run, and I've got mine. I think that what you're seeing is a strong move toward progressive candidates, because people are tired of government that doesn't work. They're tired of a system that, and I've been talking a lot this recently. My wife and I lived the American dream. We worked hard, and we invested in our future, and we knew that tomorrow was going to be better than today, right? And we started with nothing, and we built a life together. And now, if you start with nothing, that's probably what you're going to end up with, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you're seeing the progressives do better, because we're talking about real changes that make a difference in people's lives. And I'll throw in one cautionary tale or note. And that is that we need to make sure that we are focusing on, and when we get into power, that we make a difference in people's lives that are sustainable and realizable. I was at a meeting, and it was an open discussion, and there were questions and answers, and somebody came up to me after, and he said, Brad, he said, there were a lot of great questions, and you did a great job answering all these questions, but I don't think anything that was asked here really are high on the mind of people making $50,000 a year. And we need to make sure that we are focused, just tightly focused on economics and healthcare and things that make a difference in people's lives today, and making sure that we've got FEMA and protections and flood control and emergency management and all of the things that go into people's lives. If we get too far down the rabbit hole into esoteric topics or topics that people feel are esoteric, then we're going to win a lot of primaries and we're going to lose generals, right? And then and just to belabor it a little bit more, we got in with Biden, and there were some good things that happened. We did a bad job of explaining and showing and tying and making sure that those impacts were real and felt by the American people. So part of that backlog, part of the reason that Trump is in power today is that we spent too much time squabbling amongst ourselves and picking the fly shit out of the pepper instead of making a real difference in people's lives.
Brad, you mentioned, you and your wife live the American dream, and I think we have to keep in mind that the possibility to even have this American dream, as we all remember it, was built by the last progressive movement and the New Deal in the 1930s. And we talked about it a little bit ago, forgetting the lessons that we learned. Things got so good that we took them for granted, and we started dismantling things. We deregulated.
Yeah.
We dismantled government. We, reduced taxes. We reduced regulation, and now here we are. It is essentially kind of a meta level version of the smaller things that we talked about earlier. Let's talk about Wisconsin, which Megan brought up, and so. Progressives had a big night in Minnesota. Next door, not so much. Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, a centrist with the backing of outgoing Governor Tony Evers, defeated Madison area state legislator Francesca Hong, who was hoping to ride a wave of recent progressive victories and whom polls had far ahead in the days before the election. Now, Crowley, who is looking to become the state's first black governor, won by less than 4,000 votes out of more than 792,000 cast. From PBS, quote, Hong called for free childcare and health care and a moratorium on artificial intelligence data center construction, but she also wrestled with her past support for defunding the police, saying at the state's only debate that she would not support cutting law enforcement funding. She also drew criticism for past social media posts, like Megan mentioned, in which she called for canceling Thanksgiving because we should stop celebrating colonialism, and also disparaged Valentine's Day as another day capitalism tells you how to show love. Crowley will face Republican Tom Tiffany, an election denier who voted against certifying Joe Biden's 2020 win while serving in Congress. Tiffany kicked off the general election push by attacking Crowley from the left on data centers. And this is from WSAW at a rally in Mossany. Tiffany, quote, addressed growing concerns over the expansion of energy-intensive data centers and clean energy projects like wind and solar on Wisconsin's agricultural lands, while acknowledging the necessity of local data centers to keep technology from being outsourced to China. Excuse me. The congressman insisted that their development be strictly conditioned. Tiffany pledged to end the state subsidies signed into law by Governor Evers for wealthy tech corporations, ban non-disclosure agreements to ensure full negotiating transparency with local governments, and guarantee that data centers do not increase residential utility rates, end quote. Now, this is very smart from Tiffany, who, doesn't know how to count since he, rejected Joe Biden's election win in 2020, but he's smart enough to know that this was a wedge issue in the Democratic primary, and he picked up Hong's criticism of Crowley in that Crowley has been an advocate of these data centers. Oh, and Brad, sorry, that was for you.
I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, I didn't. I was like, yeah, tagger it.
Yeah, so I think that all the things that you mentioned are important. That we need to stop the irresponsible implementation of data centers. And if data center is going to go into a community, the community needs to have a say in whether they want it or not. They need to have full understanding, which means NDAs should be illegal. The fear that I have, even more than data centers, is the data centers were set. The reason they're proliferating as quickly as they are is two things. Number one, Indiana set up a very friendly tax incentives that they don't have to pay for 20 years, in some cases longer, for taxes on infrastructure and I think some other things. And then the president put a presidential, I almost said edict, but we'll say an edict, encouraging it. But what absolutely scares me is Indiana wants to be, or at least the state government is trying to make us ground zero for small nuclear modular reactors. And they're going to use the exact same playbook. So if you think about the impact of, hey, they want to put a data center in my community, in rural Scott County or Washington County or Franklin County, they're going to want to use the exact same playbook to put in a nuclear modular reactor in your backyard. And the federal government has cut the EPA and the I think they cut it by about 20%. The organization that oversees nuclear regulation. So, once again, we're going to be have this foisted upon us with no regulatory backup and no oversight backup, and it's going to be the Wild West, and it's going to end badly for us.
Well, listen, Brad, at least the modular nuclear can't be overwhelmed by jellyfish. But
it can, somebody was, it cannot, you are right. But, somebody was talking about, we've used small nuclear modular reactors in Navy submarines for many years. And I would remind them that there were a contingent of Marines that guard that day and night, right? Security is a big issue. So, and the oversight is not where it's needs to be. I don't trust the federal government to look at our best interest instead of the best interest of the companies. The last point that I'll make is Bill Gates is behind at least one of the companies that's trying to do this. And for those of you with a little bit of gray hair that remember Bill Gates rolling out Windows, those things crash and we got the blue screen of death and, break it and move fast. This is not the attitude we need in nuclear modular reactors.
Doc, I want to go back to Francesca Hong real quick. You mentioned this was a very close race. Only less than 4,000 votes separated them. But yet, the mainstream media is like, that's it. That's the end of the progressive movement. They lost this one race, kind of ignoring everything else around there. But then also like the focus on some of her tweets, the Thanksgiving, she makes a valid point. Listen, Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday as a glutton and somebody who enjoys baking. I will outbake everybody's grandmother here, by the way. I make a good pie.
I'm no contest, so.
But they focused on that, kind of criticizing her like she's some sort of unserious person. Like ignoring the fact that, like, I don't know, President Trump and countless other dudes are like showing their ass on social media all the time. It reeks of misogyny.
Yeah, it was a very interesting race, I think, on a lot of levels. But I think the progressive movement is really, and I think Brad spoke to this earlier, and I do think there's a lot of truth to it, is like the more esoteric stuff, which we're calling more esoteric, or the more, I don't know, maybe exotic isn't the right word, but when we're not focusing on jobs and we're not focusing on pay, when we're not focusing on those main things, which will actually help the more esoteric things, you know what I mean? When you're having to defend yourself about Thanksgiving, I mean, the points that she made up, I actually agree with, but it's a messaging problem, because when you're defending Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day, you're not talking about the mainstream policies, which are making the progressive movement so powerful, which is things like the Bernie Sanders, a la Bernie Sanders. He's not talking about pronouns and, I mean, things that I still think are important, but he's not focusing on that. He's focusing on getting jobs and raising the minimum wage and Medicare for all. That's what he's focusing on, because it's a winning ticket. And so I think, well, maybe we can learn from the Hong Crawley primary results is just that just any progressive isn't going to do it. I mean, there has to be a very specific messaging that is and people may get upset about that. I mean, and that's fine, but it's just, I think the winning ticket is to just focus on everyday issues that are affecting people, like Mamdani, childcare, right? Like childcare issues, raising the minimum wage, Medicare for all, things that everybody can get behind. I mean, it's why Bernie Sanders went for Indiana, like way back when, because he had a message that resonated with people. And I think it's also interesting to note that Bernie Sanders and AOC did not endorse Francesca Hong before. So I mean, it's just, I mean, it's a little thing, but I thought that was interesting. So
that could have really helped put her over the edge. And
it could have.
That wasn't what her campaign was about. That was what others made her campaign about.
Sure,
she didn't talk about those on the campaign trail. Those are just old tweets. I want to talk about the other primaries Tuesday really quickly. In New England, outsiders had a good night with former Hartford Mayor Luke Brannan handily defeating incumbent Representative John Larson in the 1st Congressional District Democratic primary, though not terribly more progressive than Larson. Brannan implied the 78-year-old incumbent was too old and out of touch to continue. In Vermont, economist Amanda Janu defeated well-funded former lobbyist Allie Richards in the Democratic gubernatorial primary. As blue as Vermont is, Republican incumbent Phil Scott awaits in November. Below the Mason-Dixon line, South Carolina held a special primary for the Senate seat vacated by the death of Lindsey Graham. His sister Darlene has been serving in an interim role and finished atop the primary Tuesday, but did not secure a majority, setting up a runoff there in 2 weeks against far-right House Freedom Caucus member Ralph Norman. Alabama also held special primaries in 4 congressional districts. Results of the May 19th primaries were invalidated by state lawmakers who hastily redrew the state's congressional maps after the Supreme Court's Calais decision gutted the Voting Rights Act's protection for majority-minority districts. 2nd District incumbent Shamari Figures is the most likely casualty of the gerrymander, his district going from a little less than half black to a little less than 40% black. Under the new maps, he will face State Representative Rhett Marcus, who won the Republican primary in November. Megan, thoughts about any of those?
So I didn't look into those as closely as I did the Minnesota, Wisconsin primaries. But again, I do think we see the overarching theme of things moving more progressive, candidates that are younger. It was in Alabama that they threw out the original. Hi there. But I do think the redistricting, the direct consequences of that. Oh my gosh, can you still hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. The direct consequences of redistricting, which we're going to see come up again in Indiana. I mean, it's terrifying that all of the Republicans that actually voted against redistricting all got primary. I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about Deary, but it's like people are. It's scary. It's scary. We saw the direct consequences of redistricting and the example from Alabama. But yeah, my overall thoughts are: hey, things are moving more progressive. Things are moving younger. I mean, there's hope. We just got to win in the midterms.
Brad, final takeaways from Tuesday.
It's time for change, and I just keep beating the drum. We need to be focused on things that are going to make a difference in people's lives. We need to make sure that when we get in power, we do the work instead of fighting against each other. I saw a cartoon that showed, what Democrats are against each other, and they had a picture of Godzilla, and then below it said what Democrats are against Republicans, and had a picture of Barney the dinosaur. We need to flip that. We need to be working together, and we've got the best chance in decades to flip this seat to the Democrats, and that's my plan.
And listen, that's my district, so we're pulling for you big time there, Brad. Let's move on. So we've talked about these primaries. There's only a few states yet to hold primaries over the coming weeks, and the general, excuse me, in November will be held under conditions where the Trump administration is waging an all-out assault on voting. Now, this week, a federal judge ruled against President Trump's most recent executive order that sought to create a federal voter list and directly involve the U.S. Postal Service in election operations in a way that could limit mail-in voting. This creates another hurdle for the administration to overcome should it get the initial injunction lifted by the Supreme Court. Recall in July, the administration requested that the court halt lower court decisions that have blocked his sweeping voting changes in nearly half the country. Now, in preparation for what may happen after November, top Democrats are simulating election threats. And this is from The Guardian. So at a D.C. conference room last month, some of the most senior Democrats in the U.S. Senate gathered to plan for a prospect that only recently would have felt more akin to science fiction. They started to wargame democracy. Chuck Schumer was there, along with Senators Alex Padilla, Adam Schiff, Mark Warner, Alyssa Slotkin, and Raphael Warnock. And some of the scenarios they considered: realistic AI deepfake videos showing quote unquote evidence of widespread election fraud, threats to withhold Office of Management and Budget funding for states that refuse to turn over their voter rolls, threats of FCC action against news outlets debunking the deep fakes, armed vigilantes at ballot drop boxes. This one actually happened in 2022. The firebombing of an early voting site, and last-minute deployment of ICE or the National Guard to polling stations. And, those are some of the things they're preparing for. But, here in Indiana, we have, I think, the results or evidence of election theft happening in plain sight. And this is from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. So this week, the Indiana Recount Commission flipped a Republican primary race in favor of the Trump-endorsed challenger Paula Copenhaver over incumbent state senator Spencer Deery, who opposed that congressional redistricting last December we were talking about, turning a 3-vote Deery lead into a 3-vote margin for the challenger. And now I'm reading directly. Quote, the commission threw out 8 votes for Deery and 2 for Copenhaver, all largely for technical reasons over missing signatures or initial county election officials on absentee or provisional ballots. The 3-member recount commission was divided 2-1 on tossing out 7 of the 8 votes that Deery lost. In the split votes, Republican Commissioner Paul Mullen joined with Republican Secretary of State Diego Morales, who by law is the commission's chairman. Morales was a vocal advocate of the congressional redistricting push. Mullen has previously represented Republican U.S. Senator Jim Banks in election law cases, and political groups allied with Banks were estimated to have spent more than $1 million in supporting Copenhaver's campaign. Deery's attorney said that they plan to appeal. This, it seems, is what election theft looks like. Doc.
Yeah, I mean, Deery was the one guy hanging on for dear life to not get primaried successfully, right? It was like he won by 3 votes, I think they said in the count. But back to there's a lot to unpack there, but how terrifying that the Democratic leaders of our government are hosting like what if scenarios for this next midterm. I mean, that in itself should give us pause and just, like you said, it's more like a sci-fi plot. I'd like to know what they do. Like what I'd like to know what the end result of that training was. Like, what do you do if they start spamming everyone with AI deep fakes about election fraud, or if people I'd like to know those things as a voter who's going to show up on election day. But yeah, I think the Spencer Deery news is just is a great example of true election theft. I think his lawyer had said nobody has ever thrown out paperwork just because for missing signatures or that's not a standard thing to do. And of course and it's also disenfranchising voters, who actually voted, showed up and did their thing. And then somebody didn't sign the paperwork, and so they throw the votes out. It's really distressing. And like you said, they like to broadcast all these, there's millions of illegals voting in our elections. And then here we have actual proof of disenfranchisement and theft done by our actual political representatives. So, it's scary. I don't know what else to say except to show up and vote and screw them anyway.
Well, Brad, listen, we've seen the numbers on this. The actual amount of voter fraud is, something in the hundreds of cases over the last 40 years compared to the billions of ballots cast. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. This is the voter fraud that we're supposed to be worried about right here.
Right. And to me, I think this is just another example of a symptom of the problem, right? And I'm not saying that what happened was right, but I think there's a bigger picture. It's kind of like, when a football team loses and they say, well, the referee, made a bad call and it threw the game. It's like, well, if they were ahead by 14 points, that one bad call wouldn't have made a difference.
Right.
The fact is that a person that stood up for what was right in Indiana, a Republican who stood up for what was right in Indiana, was within 3 votes of losing, and then they found a way to take it away from him. The fact that they took it away is one problem. The fact that the constituents of Indiana only gave him a 3-vote margin to work with to begin with is a symptom of how far we've slid in this society. Nixon resigned because of what today would have been, what would they call it, a 1-week headline. This is now, Watergate is now small potatoes compared to what happens on a regular basis. And we have got to stand up and fight for our democracy, and that's why I'm running.
Well, Brad, to your point, yeah, it's like there's a different Watergate every day under this Trump administration, and I think you were getting at it was that it was Republicans who made Nixon resign. Barry Goldwater and other senators walked into his office and said, "Sir, if you don't resign, we will impeach you." Where is that now? Megan, we see the far right of the the far right of the Indiana Republican Party. They're gathered in tents in cornfields holding what amounts to a modern day Klan rally these days.
Yeah, I mean, the people that have replaced the reasonable, I'll use that in quotes, Republicans who voted against redistricting are so much farther to the right. I mean, which is hard to say out loud because we already have what I would consider right to the right, like, standard GOP within our own state government. But like is it Chris Garton? Was that his name?
Oh, Chris Garton. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, when I was listening live to the redistricting, like, with the talk, and I had no idea who he was. And he got up there and started talking. And I was like, who is this guy? He's like slamming things around. He's like, he seemed like a completely non-serious person. But now he's the one who's going to, very likely be the head of the Senate, like president of our Indiana state government. I mean, the people that's what scares me is that when Trump said he was going to primary all these people who didn't do what he said, and then he really did primary all of them. They funneled so much dark money into these campaigns. And now the people that will be the next General Assembly session really does terrify me. But yeah, the meeting in cornfields. Oh my gosh. It was kind of funny too, what you were talking about with that group that met out in the middle of nowhere. And it was like, there were some people who had agreed to go, but then decided to leave because it seemed so shady. Like, and they're like, maybe this isn't a good look. Maybe this isn't a good look to like, meet out here in the middle of nowhere in the dirt and, pro-nationalist, pro-Christian, white Christian nationalist, slogans.
I joked that they're big fans of efficiency. It used to be Indiana Republicans would all bring their own white hood, and now they just all crammed under one big one. And
fair.
Yeah, it's not a good look. And Brad, to Megan's point, like I think we forget the historical perspective. The folks that we've got now in the Republican Party are so far right. They are by all fascism scholars' accounts, fascists, and the quote unquote reasonable Republicans that we've had until recently, they were pretty damn far right themselves. We forget like how far right Reagan was when he ran in 1980, and now I'm afraid like the problem is we've got folks in the Democratic Party out there like talking of Reagan fondly, like. My guy, he launched his presidential campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the Freedom Riders were pulled out of that bus and murdered. Like, it's not subtle. It was not subtle.
Yeah, what they're really trying to do is divide us and pit us against each other, so that we begin to think and view our neighbors as other. And this, we know where this hateful perspective leads us, and it belongs in our history. It has no part in our future, but they're trying to take us back to a time that we should have learned from.
Yes. Absolutely. What do they say about history? If you don't learn from it, you're bound to repeat it. Well, and they also say history may not necessarily repeat, but it certainly rhymes. We are rhyming like Biggie Smalls right now. It is definitely eerie eerily similar to echoes of the past. So, we were talking about these Republicans and our opposition, as it were, going into these November elections. Let's talk about Indiana Democrats to round out the end of the show. And this week, so Pete Buttigieg, former transportation secretary and mayor of South Bend, Indiana, announced that he is backing a crop of mostly long shot down ballot Democrats here in his former home state. The slate of endorsements in the state House and Senate was first shared with Politico. Adam Wren had this story over there. This is the first move in what his team says will be a number of state-by-state endorsements. Now, quoting Buttigieg, he says, "This is an area where Democrats should learn from Republicans who spent many years patiently and cleverly building up power all the way up from the school board level." End quote. Now, Buttigieg successfully endorsed Luke Bronin, who we talked about earlier in Connecticut. He also endorsed Rebecca Cook, who had a big win in Wisconsin. He also endorsed Angie Craig, who lost in Minnesota. So, and very much in the same way here in Indiana, his endorsements kind of span the gamut of the Democratic Overton window, as it were. He's backing state House candidates Ryan Kobanakis, Tiffany Stoner, Kim Townsend, and Lindsey Gromlich, and state Senate candidates Scott Huldeson and Gabriana Grotzel. The two Senate cats, those candidates are both like unapologetic progressives. The state House candidates maybe a little bit more in the moderate lane. He is also endorsing Kumba Kebe for state treasurer and Beau Bayh for secretary of state. Now, Bayh this week kicked off a potentially very expensive secretary of state's campaign with a massive ad buy, buying 6 figures worth of television and digital ads in the Indianapolis and South Bend markets, according to the Indiana Capital Chronicle. Now, he ended June with about $2.3 million in his campaign fund, making him the best financed Democratic candidate in years, as he tries to become the first Democrat to win statewide office here in Indiana since 2012. And if we may, guys, I would actually like to watch his ad. It's only 30 seconds here. Let us have a peek. Maybe.
Now I'm running for as a marksman. I trained as a marksman in the Marine Corps. Focus, discipline. I'm Beau Bayh. I joined the Marines to fight for this country. Now I'm running for Secretary of State to fight for you and clean up a corrupt office. I'll expose every wasted dollar and no-bid contract and work with both parties to lower taxes for families to make life more affordable. In the Marines, we accomplished the mission. The mission now is cleaning up the corruption. Let's get to work.
All right. That was the ad from Democratic Secretary of State candidate Beau Bayh here in Indiana. Brad, what do you think about that ad?
I don't think that ad was targeted to progressives.
You don't say, Brad.
I don't think it was targeted to progressives. And I'll tell you, the fact is, and this is a hard thing to say, but here in Southern Indiana in particular, in the last election, Democrats got beat 2-1. And if that ad turns out to be effective to help people start thinking about us differently, Democrats that is, then okay, that's fine. It's certainly not. It's not an ad that I've put out, so I guess I'll start with that. I hope that will attract the attention of at least 50% plus one.
Doc, as one of those progressives to whom this ad is not targeted, what do you think?
So, ever since the convention, full disclosure, I voted for Blythe Potter. I've tried to. I'm trying not to be the Godzilla in your analogy earlier,
Yep.
Brad. I'm trying to be a practical progressive, which can be difficult.
Yep.
And it's not as satisfying sometimes. So I have lots of thoughts on Beau Bayh, but I'm not going to share all of those thoughts. Other than to say, he didn't mention the Democratic Party once during that entire advertisement. Like you said, it was not geared toward us. His whole campaign, they have not reached out to progressives at all. Just full stop. And
Yep.
I think his campaign goals are to talk independents and soft Republicans, if they even exist in Indiana, over to voting for him. That's his campaign strategy, or at least that's what's become very apparent to me, I think, and others. So as I see that strategy and as I see that advertisement, I'm not giving money to Beau Bayh. I'm not canvassing for him. But what I will do is I'm a precinct chair, which is I would like to talk. Everyone who's not a precinct chair should look into it. And I'm going to boost turnout. And so that is what I'm laser focused on. I do want Democrats to win. I do want because when we turn out, we win. And so I'm trying to stay away from non-constructive commentary on more establishment Democrats, which Beau Bayh clearly is.
You very much hit it. These races at the top of the ticket. I think we've had it wrong in this state for the longest time. We think if you get the top of the ticket to win, it's going to pull everybody else up. And these races are really won at the bottom with turnout and enthusiasm.
Yes.
And that's why, listen, I've also been hard on Beau Bayh, and I'm not going to talk about any of that now. Let's keep it focused purely on strategy. This is a bad strategy because it alienates the very people you need to turn out and be enthusiastic and go out there and canvassing. This is not going to play well in the cities where gun violence is a real problem. This is certainly not going to play well with the Moms Demand crowd. This is focused on MAGA voters, on Republican voters who, guess what? They're not going to vote for a Democrat anyway. I don't know if you're going to pull any people. The left lane is wide open, and he refuses to drive in it. He says, "Let me merge right, or I will shoot." And he will find that there is another Marine veteran right there in that center lane already. I don't know what the appeal is. This is just terrible strategy all around. I think, look, again, the left lane is wide open. Run in it, please. I beg. Brad, thoughts about Pete Buttigieg getting involved in these Indiana races?
Well, I'd like to stay on Beau Bayh for just a minute.
Please.
So I'm running as a progressive, and I'm unabashedly progressive. I'm advocating for Medicare for all and a $20 an hour minimum wage and the first $20,000 tax free, and right. So I believe in the progressive ideals, but we had so when Evan Bayh was in the Senate, he didn't vote the way a lot of Democrats wanted on healthcare and some other things, and they threatened to primary him. And he's like, okay, fine, I'm done. I don't need this crap, right? And he dropped out, and we haven't had a Democrat in that office really since. Now, if we had threatened to primary him and he had dropped out, and then we had replaced him with another quote unquote good Democrat that was more progressive that we liked, then I would say that was a politically astute thing to do that got us better representation. But the fact is we haven't had any representation at all. At this point, the tent needs to be big enough for progressives like me and more conservative people like Beau Bayh to run their races. He's a teammate. I'm a big fan of Blythe Potter. She and I have worked together on many things and protests. But at this point, we're done with who should have been the teammate. he needs to be able to run his race. So as far as Pete Buttigieg, getting into the endorsing business, I have not talked to him about an endorsement. I guess it would probably be a smart thing to look into that. And I think that he is an impressive, articulate, well-spoken, very deep thinker. I really like him, so I can endorse him, even though he hasn't asked for it either. But it's interesting. He's making moves that imply he's not planning on staying in retirement.
Pete Buttigieg is not only running for president in 2028, Pete Buttigieg has been running for president since he was like 18.
Yeah.
And listen, Brad, back to Beau. Listen, you're on the same ticket. You're on the same team. That's why you want him to run a good winning strategy and not the same losing strategy that Indiana Democrats have run for the last 20 years. This is a shot for shot copy almost of
Joe Donnelly
ad in 2018 that also with the axe. It's inauthentic. It is about organic as a chicken McNugget. Doc, last words.
Just get involved. Whoever's hearing all this, we can't all be news junkies all the time and pay attention to everything. Get involved locally, whether it's supporting a candidate, an issue, run for precinct chair, show up at your Democratic club meetings. I mean, this only works if we all participate. Despair is not an option at this point. I mean, it is, but it's a really crappy one. So just get in the race. Get it however that looks for you. It's different for everybody.
All right. So just a couple minutes here. Let's wrap things up. And Brad, where can the good folks of Indiana's 9th District and beyond find out more about you, more about your campaign? How can they donate, volunteer, all of that good stuff?
Thank you for allowing me to make the plug. I was trying to figure out how I was going to weasel this into my closing. You can go to bradmeyer.org. That's Brad Meyer, MEYER.org. And there you can get information on donating. You can get information on my policy positions. And then there's a social media link that can take you to Facebook, X, and a variety of other platforms.
And Megan, how about for folks there in Marion County, in Indianapolis? How can they get involved with Indiana Progressive Democrats or what you're doing there? Can folks connect with you on social media?
So Indiana Progressive Democrats, Indiana Progressive Democrats is our Facebook, and you can message me directly through that, but you can also find me, I'm an old millennial. I only do Facebook. I'm like, Megan Alderman, you can find me. It's just my name for Facebook if you message me directly, but if you message me directly through Indiana Progressive Democrats, I will answer that. And I'd love to talk to you about getting involved in grassroots efforts in Marion County.
But you've got a doppelganger out there, so don't harass Megan's sister.
And she's leading a pack. She's actually leading a pack she's a huge public school advocate. We didn't get to talk about public education, which is a huge passion of mine. But my sister's leading a pack for the Washington Township referendum for public schools. So everybody keep an eye out for your ballot. I think it's 38 counties are having referenda for public schools within Indiana. It may even be more than that because the GOP in Indiana has done so much to gut and privatize public education that everyone's going to be feeling it. Whether you're in rural areas, whether you're in Carmel, Indiana, it's coming for everybody.
Well, and I'm glad you took us there because Tuesday night at 7:00, I am hosting the Who's Left Back to School special, where
perfect.
where I will talk to a couple of school board candidates from various parts of the state. We've got some policy experts coming in and activists for public education. We're going to talk about the referendums. We're going to talk about the Christian nationalist movement trying to take over these schools. We're going to talk about vouchers. We're going to talk about all that sort of good stuff. That is 7:00 Tuesday night, a double stuffed episode of Who's Left for Back to School. Is that a?
Yeah, it's a little hand up. So I should say too, our Progressive Democrats of America Indiana chapter has monthly meetings. And our next meeting is September 20th at 4550 Central Avenue in Indianapolis. And we are focusing on public education as well. We'll have the superintendent of Washington Township Schools. We'll have school board candidates. It's going to be similar to your discussion. So we always have dinner. And Brad's got a hand up too.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that in the primary, we did 17 live town halls, and we're going to announce very soon, I think about 17 town halls for the general election, starting late this month and going through September. So just everybody be aware. You can see on Facebook and on the website those announcements as they come out, but they're imminent.
Fantastic. And if you can't or don't want to leave the house, we've got a virtual town hall with Brad coming up on September 28th. We're doing a whole series of virtual town halls with a lot of our congressional Democratic candidates here in Indiana, starting Monday, August 31st with 4th District candidate Drew Cox. That's a Monday night, 7 o'clock there. We'll have more information about those coming up soon. But hey, let's get this thing wrapped up here. So you can find me online at Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM on any of those with feedback, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. We cannot do this work without you. Please consider supporting our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net, or even better, take that money and give it to the local charities helping out with flood recovery and relief efforts here in our state. Thank you for watching and listening. Thanks, Brad and Megan, for joining me here on this fine Sunday morning. Let us keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.